Welcome to Tales from the Bridge. Okay, so Marty, Kevin, Sam, and myself went to FanExpo Canada last week, and we just wanted to recap the whole event because we did some panels with Karl Schroeder and Peter Watts. We did another panel where we just had an interactive conversation with the audience members about favorite books, TV, and movies. We had an amazing weekend where we met a few people. You'll have to listen to find out what happened. So, yeah, let's just make our way over to the bridge. So FanExpo was, I got to be honest, I think FanExpo was one of the most fun weekends I've had in like over a year. It was so fun. I keep thinking of it, and I keep thinking of even where I parked my car, and I'm like, I just want to go park my car there again. It was so much fun.
You landed free overnight parking in Toronto.
Oh, that's right.
In Little Korea. It's never done.
Yeah.
It's the first time ever.
Yeah, I agree. I loved it. I thought all of it was really good. I wish I could have seen more. I wish I had made the time to see more, but I felt good about the sessions that we did, and I feel like the people who attended enjoyed at the very least our last session, and the other two I think that they kind of enjoyed too. I felt good about it by the end of it.
Well, let's talk about exactly what we did. How did it start off?
Well, we started with Karl Schroeder, right? We did an excellent discussion of why we should colonize Venus. And at first, I have to say, I didn't really understand why Karl wanted to talk about colonizing Venus, because I thought this was just like a sci-fi plot type thing. Little did I realize that actually this might be the most logical location for humans to be colonizing in our solar system. I had absolutely no idea. I just thought about Venus as being this treasure trove of death, with cyanide in the atmosphere and whatever 49 bar atmosphere. But he laid out a pretty neat, compelling case to go colonize Venus.
I agree. I mean, I thought it was all new to me. I'd never heard any of these things. And just that chart that he put up, well, just the very notion that, like, look, if it's 50 atmospheres at the surface, there's somewhere above the surface that you hit 1 atmosphere. So that alone was an amazing insight for me. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, so up in the sky somewhere there is quite a benign environment, I guess, or it could be fairly benign. And I gather the gases aren't as bad as we've been led to believe in terms of the acid in the atmosphere.
The thing that really landed with me was his chart of what it cost to live on Earth. What's free? Your air is free, and which all these resources that are free, and then what that where it costs, everything actually associated with those. Each of those resources comes with a cost on the moon or on Mars. And then when he brings up Venus again, you start to see free. Like things are actually available to you that we can survive in, and we don't have to actually create ourselves. And I'm doing a poor job of describing the slide, but that really jumped out at me. I think maybe one of you can remember each of the sections. I think it was like there was air for sure,
pressure,
yeah, gravity,
energy.
Yeah,
and there was radiation protection. I think was another one,
which surprised me. I wouldn't have thought that'd be the case. Why would there be radiation protection, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you get a lot for having an atmosphere is really what it all comes down to, and the same size. So, Venus has the same gravity as Earth, so that's a big bonus over Mars or the moon. Mm-hmm. And then it has an atmosphere in a way that the moon or Mars don't have. And that gets you a lot already, right? It gives you pressure, it gives you resources, gases, and it gives you this envelope to protect you against radiation. Mm-hmm. So that was a lot. But after, I love that table as well. I thought it really made the point very well. But it was missing a column, and I realized, or a row, I realized afterwards what it was, and that was real estate. So when you're on a surface, the whole point is that's real estate. The real estate comes free on the moon and on Mars and on Earth because you're standing on the surface of a planet. If you have to build air cities, while you get the atmosphere and all of that on Venus, you now have to create your own real estate, right? Mm-hmm. You don't get that surface for free anymore. So I think that might be a large counter argument, depending on the availability of resources and how easy it is to build sky cities or these rotating cylinders, right? But the real estate isn't free.
And the wind shear, right? He said it's kind of
shear,
unknown just how much the wind would buffet these things. I thought it was cool that he said that you'd be able to take one of a starship and you should fire your retro rockets and slow yourself down, and then at about where it's 1 atmosphere, a little bit below where it's 1 atmosphere, you're just going to float there. So if your spaceship becomes a bubble that floats at somewhere close to the level that you want to be at, just naturally. I'm not entirely sure if that's true, because there's going to be a fair amount of weight with these spaceships, but somewhere around there, they're supposed to just stop.
Yeah. Well, it's wherever the density of the whole thing is the same as the density of the air, presumably, right? And,
about 50 kilometers, I think he said, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's where it's 1 atmosphere. So if your airship is full of 1 atmosphere pressure, then you'll float at 1 atmosphere roughly.
And his argument for that was that you could almost treat it like a warehouse. And if in terms of trade, interplanetary trade, let's say in between different parts of the solar system, this sits at a sort of sweet spot in between, and now you've also got a place to park stuff for a little while or store stuff, and I guess maybe that leads into a bit of the real estate, the sort of sky real estate. If you can sort of float things there without a lot of effort, it gives you a basis to grow. I think using some sort of bamboo derivative. He was talking about growing the air. I mean, it gets out there, but this is all out there, right? So, but that was sort of an interesting piece of this as well. But there is a mental thing that humans would have to get around, that you don't actually get to go on the surface, and there is no, all your real estate you have to make. Then he had one more amazing idea that was totally new to me, which is that the fastest way across the solar system is towards the sun and past the sun, and so actually inner planets are more useful as trading posts, I guess is what it comes down to. It's actually easier to get from Earth to Venus, or even from Mars to Venus, I think he was saying, right? Because depending on the orbit,
or even the asteroid belt,
where the planets are, or even the asteroid belt, because we think of Mars as being closer to the asteroid belt, but Venus is closer if it's at the right part of its orbit compared to Mars. That was really cool.
Everything
about that here.
Yeah, the ideas he presented was cool, and it was very cool to just hang out with Karl Schroeder at FanExpo. And something really neat about that too is we had a really good turnout in the room that we did this. FanExpo was really good with just helping us out there. But Peter Watts was sitting in the crowd with us, and that was really cool.
He came up just after Karl, right? He did his talk. And that one with Karl was a bit more Q&A. With Peter, it was a bit more, he did a talk, and then we kind of all reeled from what he said and had a few comments afterwards. But, Peter being, I don't know, a realist dystopian scientist, basically laid out why humanity was doomed, and humanity was doomed because of humanity, right? Is that there's nothing we can do. We're just going to consume resources and we're just going to kill ourselves. So let's just not even bother with anything, really. He didn't say that explicitly, but it left everybody feeling fairly hopeless. He left us a little shell-shocked there, I'd say. And but he set the tone perfectly with this little snippet from a science fiction show that he showed in the first 3 minutes, which he said, this basically summarizes my whole talk. And so it's a little movie about a woman with her son coming to a bus station, starting up a conversation with somebody sitting there, and the woman says, we're taking the bus because we have to take responsibility for our carbon emissions, and we're not going to fly to the south of France because of all the CO2 that budget. And then this guy says, if you want to take responsibility, why'd you have him? I mean, you could fly 6,000 times a year to the south of France for the carbon emissions that your son is going to produce throughout his lifetime. So the best thing you could do for the planet is slit his throat. So that's when a few of the families in the audience started getting up and leaving with their strollers and small children. And it was only after that video that it occurred to me to do a disclaimer to say, the topics covered here are going to be maybe a little bit mature.
Yeah.
But we didn't lose people at that point either. They kind of a few people trickled out thereafter, but most people really, I think, in connected with it and appreciated the talk.
Yeah.
Well, the
the
detail that
was-
Peter brought was great, right? Like there's so much detail. He's got a lot of data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And his point was very much that like we're wired wrong, right? Like our evolutionary history as humans has wired our brains to be optimists to some degree, right? And to not be able to solve long-term problems very well as a collective effort. And so we're not doing that. And then the title of his talk was "Horrific Solutions to the Problems Facing Humanity." So people should have
horrific ways to save the world.
Horrific ways to save the world. Yeah. And then he sort of told us that he would give us a summary of how bad the situation is, but he didn't. He sort of, that's all he did. I don't think he quite got to the horrific solutions part, except to suggest that our brains could be rewired to be more realistically in contact with the facts of the world by making us all clinically depressed, because clinically depressed people are greater pragmatists, I gather, than the rest of us. I think he had a couple other ones. What else did he have?
He also suggested there was an element of Parkinson's syndrome that makes you less religious, and I don't know, maybe there was something associated with that around realism. It was pretty bleak, and he basically said this isn't going to happen through governments. It's going to have to be basement hackers who come up with this and unleash it upon the world, whether they want it or not. People who can gene edit in their basements and set off bioterrorism bombs.
But I think what he was trying to do was, he basically said somewhere along the way that like people make better decisions about solving problems when they're scared. And so he was doing us the service of making us appropriately scared. And if he had sort of ended the talk with the class, the sort of narrative arc finishes by him telling us, and here's what you can do, call 911, whatever it is. He didn't do that, right? He just sort of left it there and left us all appropriately disturbed and scared. And I think that was kind of his point.
Yeah,
I love that. But then we got to go out and eat food with him.
Yeah.
And talk prog rock and movies.
Yeah, he cheered up when he had some fish and chips in him. Yeah.
And beer from a pitcher.
Yeah. First time for all of us drinking beer out of a pitcher in a while.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah.
So that was fun to do that. And then we lost Peter when we went back into the expo to go meet William Shatner.
Yes.
That was pretty cool. I felt like cattle. Being herded through the tunnels of black sheets that divide all these cameras and people. And there was Willie sitting behind a plexiglass with a permanent smile, and us dweebs in our Tales from the Bridge t-shirts. Something that Miranda said to me was, "You look happier than any of the family photos that we are in together."
Well, it was funny because they have that down pretty efficiently. They get the next group of people to move up to the edge of a red line, and then there's a very loud photographer who's yelling, "Ready!" and you hear a click and there's a big flash going off to do a photo with them. And if you listen, they're doing that ready and then click probably every 8 seconds or so. And, they're shunting in groups of 2 or 4 people at a time to get photos with good old Bill Shatner. And anyway, I was surprised our photo actually turned out pretty well. We all managed to get in position and have a good smile.
And that's a generous way of describing it. I wouldn't say it was ready and click. It was more like, stand at the line, take off your things, get to pose, thank you, out, next. I was like, whoa, holy smokes, it was like cattle.
Yeah,
I'm surprised they didn't throw talcum powder on us and then a fire hose of water.
Yeah, it was like the first day of boot camp.
Yeah.
It did feel like that. But you managed to say something to William. Didn't
I
you?
did. I happened to be first in line of the 4 of us, so I was walking straight up to him on the other side of the plexiglass. So I can't tell if he actually heard me, but I did say, "Congratulations for becoming the new poet laureate of planet Earth." And that's all I really wanted to say to him. But he didn't react at all. I don't know if he heard me. But the most important thing is my daughter was standing behind the curtain behind him, and she heard me say this to William Shatner. So that
way more important.
That was pretty awesome. She thought, I think that was pretty cool.
And why did you say that to him? Why did you tell him that?
Well, because he's the poet laureate of, like, when he came back from space, he had just come back from space on the Blue Origin mission, right? And he got out and he talked very, I thought, poetically and emotionally about the entire experience. And actually, we did get to go talk to him a little bit more with Tristan later. And
I figured that wasn't, the photo with him wasn't enough for me. I wanted to get up and meet him, and we did. And Marty, you got to tell him the same thing again, I believe, and we kind of.
Well, I said the same thing again, and then I told him a little more. I just sort of thanked him for bringing back the experience of space for the rest of us little people, instead of making it look like a joyride for billionaires like the rest of his crew, and like Jeff Bezos certainly made it look when he was. I mean, he just got out of the capsule. He was clearly moved to tears. He was about to start telling us, what his experience. This is an artist and a poet and a writer coming back immediately from space to tell us, and Jeff Bezos is like, oh, hold on a second, let me get the champagne bottle, and he like runs off and starts, and he just left William Shatner standing there, like shaking his head, like, I'm trying to tell you what just happened, and you guys are cracking champagne instead. So anyway, I thought he was a very classy guy. He handled that well. He waited until Jeff Bezos, got his head on straight. And then he went into this, what he said about coming back from space, which was that he was so shocked and amazed and surprised by how thin that blue cover of our planet is, the envelope that protects us, and that he. I went to the Q&A on Friday too, and he had sort of said a little more about this. That as Captain Kirk, I have quite a lot of experience, at least in the theatrical realm of space, and it's always full of amazing nebula and black holes and these, glorious giant things, and that's not at all what it was up there. All it was black. It was black, the blackness of death. And you look up and you see nothing, and then you look down on the planet and you see life and blue and color and I think what he said during the Q&A, it really stuck with me. Is he just drove home. He said, you look up, the blackness of death is out there, and the blue and green of life is down here, and it's very obvious that we belong to planet Earth, and the planet Earth belongs to us, and that's where we should be. Like, it was kind of amazing for our, this guy that's supposed to be the spokesman for space actually ended up saying, like, you know what? I'm not sure it's worth going out there. I think we really got to focus on life here. Yeah.
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. Like, you've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune in to 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
Mm-hmm. And we also had the opportunity to harass Robert Patrick, who may or may not come on the show and join us, but he's got a T-shirt for the show. We gave him a T-shirt. It may become a pajama top. We'll see.
Yep.
Robert Patrick,
or we won't see.
X-Files and the bad guy in Terminator 2, right?
Yeah,
he was
right. He's
T-1000.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's got this like FU resting face. That's kind of terrifying. And you guys went up to talk to him. I was like, he's gonna tell them where to go. They're gonna, you and Marty went up, and I was like, they're gonna come back in tears, Kevin. You're gonna have to find these guys.
He was pretty sure
to die. But what became apparent to us while we were standing in that line, though, is that he was the nicest guy there. Like, he was giving his fans so much love. It was really clear. Like, everybody that came up to him, he spent like 5 minutes with them. If they didn't know how to start the conversation, he'd start it for them. He'd talk about the picture, talk about, I don't know, where they're gonna hang it. He was just really he was loving life. I overheard him saying to one of these guys that was talking to him ahead of us. I didn't hear the question. The question was something like, "So, what are the difficulties of being a famous Hollywood star. And I just heard his answer. It was like, dude, there is no downside to this job. I love every day of my life. I've loved it for 40 years. I mean, everything is great. So I was like, oh, I like this guy.
Yeah, he was great. Actually, I caught a bit of his Q&A as well, I think on Sunday. And he was saying that one of his favorite roles was the role that he played in X-Files because he was a good guy. He just looks like a badass dude. Like, you don't want to mess with him. He just gets those roles. But I think he would like to be a good guy more often.
I am a huge X-Files fan, and I will say that his 2 years on the show were great. This is when the show was sort of falling apart at the end of seeing the end of its days, as contract disputes sort of come in and wreck everything. But him and the partner that they brought in, I forget her name, which doesn't make me that great a X-Files fan, I guess, but they were great. I would have been happy to see them in an X-Files spinoff, and it kind of was in a way, but I thought they held their own, and I was happy to watch his episodes. Like, he was great, and which might be, I don't know how widely received or well received those seasons are, but he saved those seasons. Him and the other actress he was working with, definitely. And I would have been happy to see more of them. So it was kind of cool to see him as an X-Files fan. There and he didn't hurt you guys, so that was nice to see.
And he was right beside William Shatner, and just down beside them was George Takei, right? If I'm pronouncing that right, Sulu from the original Star Trek. And for a period of time, Bill Shatner and George Takei were beside each other, not right beside each other, but there was nobody between them. And I kept looking to see whether they would make eye contact, but as I understand it, they're not the closest of buddies. And nothing, didn't even acknowledge. I suppose this is nothing new. They must go to these things all the time and ignore each other professionally.
Yeah.
I regret not going up to see George and giving him a bit of a praise or thank you, because his presence on the internet is well needed, I would say. He says and does a lot of good things. So
yeah, I agree.
Yep. And then we did a session on the best of sci-fi, right? This was the one that I was the most excited about.
Yeah, on Sunday we did that, and yeah, that was great. Yeah.
It was, it seemed like the crowd really appreciated it, and I mean, how do you do a session on the best of sci-fi in quotes? So, what we decided to do was the four of us each had one recommendation of a recommendation of good sci-fi. You can't really aspire to the best of; it's so subjective. But we each said a recommendation for a book, a TV show, and a movie, and then we went out to the audience and we asked them what their recommendations were and why. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tristan, but you got that whole list that we're going to put in the description. Is that right?
I do, yeah. So we've got lots of names of. I think we just had a really good turnout, and there were 3 Toms in the crowd. So just do the math. We had a good turnout
with 3 Toms, yeah.
But we'll add their names and their recommendations into the description. There was a few names of books, TV shows, and movies that I wasn't too familiar with, and then a lot that I was just willing to stand behind that as a great recommendation. So it was a good audience interaction and good turnout. That was a really fun panel to be a part of as well. So yeah,
I was kind of worried about how that was going to go. We'd never done this before. We submitted a description, and then I was sort of worried that we're not going to sit on stage for an hour and preach at people about our favorite things, are we? And we didn't, right? And I think we made a great decision to do each segment had its own audience participation. So we only spent maybe a minute each on our favorite book, and then opened it to the audience, and then they came and told us about their favorite books. And then we did that again for TV shows and movies. But what I loved about this whole experience was just seeing how the culture of FanExpo and Comic-Cons is very much nerdy, introverted people who love their stuff that they're fans of, right? And these are not extroverts generally, I realized, right, as we were looking in the audience, and yet they wouldn't stop coming to the microphone, right? They they really wanted to tell us about their favorite book and about their favorite movie, and everybody, just sort of, I think we gave the right opportunity for that audience, created kind of a safe space, right? When we said, well, here's what I like and why, it just invited them to do that too, and they just kept coming. I mean, we had probably 15 minutes of audience participation for every 5 minutes of us talking. And I think it was just the perfect thing to offer to that community, right? These are people who want to be asked, what is your favorite book and why, right? I mean, not everybody is that kind of nerdy, but these people were. And it was great to hear about what they like.
Our kind of people.
Our kind of people. That's right.
Larry and his daughter, props to them.
Yeah.
So if you could say your favorite moment of that weekend, what was your favorite moment of the Fan Expo weekend?
That shawarma that we had. Saturday night about 2 a.m.
Oh yeah, that was
a pretty amazing shawarma.
Well, actually, to just talk about that evening, that was great. We went out for drinks. I think we drank 2 or 3 different places, but also we were book shopping at like 10 o'clock at night at B&V Books on Bloor Street, downtown Toronto.
Yep.
That is one of my favorite bookstores in the world. And yeah, that was super fun to be looking at books that late at night. It just worked.
And you came home with stuff too.
I loved it. Like Marty said, I really loved the that my daughter could see William Shatner, right beside. And when he came out of the when he left the booth or the curtained area, she saw him leave and understood that he was just up in space last week, and this is the guy who was the captain in Star Trek. I thought that was very cool that she had that close encounter.
Yeah. I think for me too, now that you mention it, my favorite part of it was seeing the look in my children's eyes that their dad was cool again. Like after they came to the panels and they saw us up there with Peter Watts, and when I came back and on Sunday, they were only there on Saturday, but on Sunday I came back and told them about how our panel went. I had a moment where my teenage daughter was looking at me and I felt like she loved me again, and, just for doing something cool, right? I mean, nerdy cool, not cool, but we're I think a family of geeks and nerds enough that she was adequately impressed with our what we did there and how we did it and who we met, and yeah, that was great.
So I think one of my favorite moments was in the morning waiting for Peter and Karl outside in the garden area by the south entrance of the conference center. I was snapping little videos of like 5.5 foot tall Darth Vaders and people dressed in costumes that I don't even recognize, and it was great. And then to see Karl and then Peter and then to meet them for the first time was really, really cool. But I have to say, anyone at Fan Expo, anyone listening that is going to be vending at Fan Expo, please bring something Planet of the Apes for me to purchase, because I couldn't get a T-shirt. I couldn't get anything. What's wrong with this? It's Planet of the Apes.
It's an injustice.
Yeah. It's just not cool right now. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, we searched hard. We went through the whole vendor pavilion, and the costumes were great. Like we were walking through there. That's when you're in like ground zero for cosplay, and it was really pretty awesome to see some of the work that goes into these. But yeah, there was no Planet of the Apes shirts. No, none at all. Is it the forgotten sci-fi franchise? I don't know.
I think it's out of the loop for the next few years. I think there's going to be resurgence again sometime soon.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of T-shirts, I think actually another favorite moment of mine was when me and you, Tristan, we were in line waiting to talk to Robert Patrick, and we realized, like, okay, we're going to try to invite him on the show, but like we don't have anything with us. We don't have a card even like that says, Tales from the Bridge. We don't have a magnet. We don't have like anything we can just give him as the invite. And then the light bulb went off. We're like, what? Wait, we have an extra T-shirt in the backpack right here. And so that was what we gave him as our card, our calling card. And he thought it was pretty cool. He showed it off a little bit. I mean, who knows? And maybe it'll just be thrown out. But if he does actually, just glance at that shirt and decide to listen to the show sometime, that's already amazing. And oh my God, what if he actually wore it somewhere just as like a nerd thing? And some other people saw that shirt and were like, oh,
I don't know. He owns a Harley dealership, man. Like,
Hey, man, geek is cool. Geek is in. I mean, he's got to be. I mean, he's been a geek lord for his entire career. So I'm sure. Geek lord. I mean, all his fans are nerds. Maybe not all of them. But,
Well, overall, great weekend. I can't wait to do more of these kinds of conferences and.
Yeah, next time we're
Exhibits.
showing up with 20 extra shirts, and we'll stand in all those lines, and we'll give shirts to everybody.
FanExpo. I cannot wait for next year. That was so much fun. So, were you there? Did you go to FanExpo? Did you see us at the panel? Did you participate? Let us know. Email us. All right. Next episode, we are talking to Cory Doctorow, one of the most interesting people on planet Earth. Did you know that? Yeah. You should probably listen to that conversation. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time.